For more than 100 years, the Haley Red Family Foundation has proudly supported Auburn University scholarships, investing in students' dreams and brighter futures. For over 25 years, we've also stood beside the Sheriff's Girls Ranch, helping young women find hope and opportunity. The Haley Red Family Foundation, building generations of success.
Welcome in again, everybody, to the Terry Bowden Show on the Auburn Undercover Podcast. Coach, how you doing today?
Doing great. So good to start our second week on our podcast together on the Auburn Undercover Network. Again, I just want to say thank you to the Haley Red Family Foundation who sponsor this show. They have been such great supporters, giving scholarships to Auburn for almost 100 years. I got to say, Tom Haley, I know very well with Haley Red Development. His father was an AD at Auburn years ago, and he and my dad grew up in Birmingham together. And Tom Haley, who kind of runs the show from the Haley side, has been a good friend of mine. And we thank him. There's not a greater Auburn man in Auburn than he and his family. Brother Dick played for Auburn, dad, former coach, a captain of the football team in the 50s. AD, coach and AD, but thank y'all, and it's given us a chance to have some fun. I'm having more fun getting back, Ronnie, that since you asked me to come back and do this show, we're having more fun talking about Auburn, some new, some old, but a lot of fun, and we had a good fun week.
We did. I know Auburn people feel pretty good now. We got 2 weeks.
Well, we ought to feel good. So many times, and I wrote about this on our website, that we sometimes worry too much about and analyze too much about a win over a lousy team or not a big enough win. And sometimes you just got to say, hey, we did everything. We checked almost every box we were supposed to check. Came out ready to play, didn't turn the ball over as much as the other team, stuffed them on offense, stuffed them with our defense, showed that we can throw the ball as well as run it, all those things. So let's don't overanalyze it. Thankful that we didn't go through what LSU went through with that tough game against La Tech, or what Georgia went through with App State. Austin Peay, or even what Clemson was down 16-0 at the game with Troy. And so I think we ought to be pretty happy at Auburn because we went there, kept our focus on football, even though we could have been a little bit down after a big win against Baylor. Came ready to do business. And won a game handily, played a lot of people, and had a lot of fun in Jordan-Hare. We did.
It was a good weekend for Auburn fans for sure. Mm-hmm. We got a special guest today. We want to bring in and get his thoughts. How you doing today?
I am great. Great to be on with two greats in this day and age. How are you guys doing?
We're good.
Dennis doing great, but good to see you too. We go way back. It seems like. Back not just somewhere between my football career and my broadcasting career, we started getting together, and it seems like for every year since, if there's a story out there or there's a controversy or an issue, I want to know what Dennis Dodd had to say about it. And now that you're kind of retired, I guess I'm not finding the Dennis Dodd articles when I need one. And how's life treating you? So you're kind of retired, or are you still doing much with football, anything with football?
Yeah, I am. I got a couple of radio gigs. I'm writing regularly on Substack weekly. I just went to the Missouri-Kansas game. That was because of my son. It was a birthday present to him. But I wrote about being a fan and a tailgater for the first time ever. I started to think about it. I don't think I've ever sat in the stands. And I was getting antsy. Like I was looking for handouts with the stats on them from the press box. But, and tailgated. That was a new experience. So it's a strange world out there among the fans. I'll say that. I had a lot of, evidence of knee-jerk reaction. Coaches get it. Media get it. Media does it. I met a guy sitting in front of me when Missouri was down 21-6, texting a friend. I've had enough of this NIL stuff. Fire Eli Drinkowitz. Well, Missouri won. It was a great win.
Right.
What was it? 42-31.
Mm-hmm.
Their biggest comeback, I think, since 2015. So the biggest comeback in 10 years. Just shows you how fickle really everyone is.
Well, and it's funny. It's a little bit about what football's about. that game didn't mean a lot to Southerners. I mean, Missouri now has come into the SEC, but I mean, that's a border war that they hadn't played, I think, since 2011, and they
That's
brought
right.
it back after 14 years. And I couldn't wait to watch it. I coached against Lance Leopold when he was at Buffalo. I think Missouri's got one of the best coaches in the country as well. And I knew that many people in the SEC don't know Kansas is a lot better than people think they are. You know, this guy has got them winning. Last year was kind of tough, but I thought it'd be a great game. And man, when it got started like that, Missouri they showed how good they are because they got down and had to come back.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with these running backs that they have. Roberts and Andre Hardy, who went for 143 yards. I think both of these guys were over 100 yards. But the story of the game was Bo Pribula, who was a backup at Penn State to Drew Aller, and was kind of a change of pace guy, run pass guy, was really asked to run in a Wildcat at Penn State, but has turned out to be a pretty complete quarterback at Missouri through 2 games. He was 24 out of 28, I think, threw 4 touchdowns on Saturday. And they look like they've got something. The thing nobody talks about is that Missouri plays 6 straight home games to start the season, and they get a bye, Terry, before Alabama, which is starting to look like something now.
Yeah, and the way they
get
came
Alabama
back
at home.
Yeah, and the way they came back against Kansas, I wasn't sure with what they lost last year. I know they got the running back from ULM, you know, the one running back from ULM, but I said they can't be. It's at Missouri. They can't reload enough to be that good as they have been the last couple of years. But when I watched the way they came back, and then of course Pribula could have been the back. You know, I think it was Sam Horn that got hurt on the first run that he had in the first game that he played.
Yeah.
He got hurt, and so thank goodness Pribula, who I watched at Penn State, came on, and they're going to be interested. You're right, because their schedule is going to be interested with them. But anyway, let me ask you this. Going back, I'm thinking back, and I was reading a little background on you, and I've known you for a long time, but you talked about some of the funny things you've had in your career, and I think I've seen you at championship games and every kind of game, it seemed like, and I would call you, or you would call me when there was a big story or a big issue, and we wanted somebody's opinion. But you had the funny story about the 2000. I think it was you've been to almost every national championship game, and you were talking, I think, somewhere about you got locked out into a few stadiums and couldn't get out, staying so late. And the 2000 national championship game between Florida State and Oklahoma was one that you remembered.
Yeah, I've been locked out of 3. I've been locked in
Yes.
3 stadiums. That's the term. Twice at Alabama. We can talk about that, but at that was the second BCS championship game in 2000 at Hard Rock Stadium, and I put it on. Some of this I put on me because I worked so late, and I was done, and it started to go down like I was the last one out of the press box. I don't even remember who was left in the press box, and I started to walk down and got down to the street level. And Terry, you know this, Hard Rock is so symmetrical that you lose sense of direction. You know, it's on the west side, east side. It doesn't matter. It looks all the same. So there was no gates open. There was no one around. I ended up with a backpack on my back, scaling a 12-foot fence to get out. And it started to rain. And I didn't know, again, symmetrical, didn't know where my rental car was. And finally, a cop who was just kind of patrolling stopped by, and he goes, "You need a ride?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm trying to find my car." And even then, I go, "I think it's over there." Found it, got back to the hotel room. I think my head hit the pillow at 5 a.m. And the day after presser started at 8 o'clock. So they didn't get much out of Dennis Dodd that next day.
It was, I remember that game as well, because I was doing that game as well. That was when I had left Auburn and was working for ABC Sports in New York with John Saunders. And we always got to take our studio down to the championship game, set up the stage in the end zone, and do the pregame and halftime. And I can remember because I was trying to criticize my dad once in a while, and he won every game, and he was undefeated in '99. I could say nothing bad about him in my first year, and he almost didn't win. He ended up losing that game. But the funny thing about that game, I'm in the tunnel waiting for Oklahoma and Florida State to come out. And Denzel Washington was on the sideline that game because ABC likes to have one of their stars. And I think The Return of the Titans was a movie they had at that year. So he was on the sidelines trying to make it feel like a big game. And John Saunders and I were talking to him. And when Oklahoma came out, I watched the faces of their entire team come out. Not one of them even noticed him.
Oh,
My opening lines in my pregame discussion was Florida State not going to win this game. That team is so focused. I just watched the entire team walk by Denzel Washington, and not one of them even knew who he was. I said, Florida State better watch out. And of course, Josh Heupel was the quarterback at Oklahoma, now at Tennessee. They upset Florida State, win the game, and it ended up being a little true story there for that game. But it takes us back to older times.
yeah, no, it was that the game itself was kind of a letdown given the
Yeah,
firepower on both sides. Oklahoma was averaging almost 50 points a game. I think they went into Kansas
right.
State that season when Kansas State had it rolling and just completely demolished them. And Barry Switzer was wearing a fur coat on the sidelines, and I went up to him on the OU sidelines, and he said something to the effect, "It's been a nice ride, K-State," because really Oklahoma had reestablished itself that
Right.
year quickly with Bob Stoops in year two, and now it looks like they've kind of established themselves again. But we'll wait and see after Saturday.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because they've added the passing game back to it, just like Bob Stoops did. And then even at Florida, when Bob Stoops was the defensive coordinator, you put a Spurrier offense with a Bob Stoops defense.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Venables defense, with a Washington State offense. You got a little excitement going on there in that game. But going back, and I think you've covered so many games. Are there any special games in your career covering games that you thought they left memories more than others?
Oh gosh, at all 16 of the BCS championship games, 25 of 27 overall at CBS. The only time I missed was COVID, and then my wife had some health issues one year. But look, the pick six, that thing, the rematch, LSU Alabama in 2011, where there were 50,000 people outside of the stadium that didn't have tickets. Now, it was a bad game. It's 21-0 Alabama, but we know what that meant. I mean, that was 5 years into the SEC's, dominance they currently enjoy. I think it's 13 out of the last 19 championships, because the Big Ten has won 2 in a row. But that game and the hype running up to it was like a Super Bowl. LSU had won the first game 9-6 in overtime, I think, at Alabama, Les Miles' team. Mostly SEC. 2007, there was a Florida LSU game where I remember looking out the back of the press box, and again, estimates of 50,000 people without tickets partying in the parking lot. That should be a surprise to absolutely no one who understands LSU. But it was something. It was some of these rivalry games. After experiencing the whole thing, the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry, there's so much hate. I know about the Iron Bowl. I know about all these other ones. I get it. But after what I went through last year with Ohio State, a complete no-show against Michigan. Michigan wins a game. That was not a great Michigan team. And then the fight at the end, remember that, complete with pepper spray. Got involved in that third time. I got pepper sprayed 3 times in my career. And then I remember asking Will Howard in the press box in the post game, where on your list of priorities is the fact that you guys are alive and well in the playoff? And he said, "I'm not even thinking about that right now." Well, not only did they recover, they won the national championship. And then you see a game like a guy like Dave Portnoy on Fox coming on and trolling Ohio State fans, and they're taking the bait because they've lost 4 times. But Michigan, you're national champions. At some point, losing to Michigan has to be down there a little bit. But that rivalry, having been around it, really around all of them, big, that really resonates now because it's pure unadulterated hate.
It's funny because, now, of course, I was a head coach in 6 different decades, from 1983 to 2023. You were a broadcast. You've been a writer for about as long. Even my dad goes back a couple of decades before that in college football, and so much has changed. But now we really are hitting some changes. I want to say this first, is that college football has been such a regional game. one of the positives, it's now more of a national game.
Oh,
We've
yeah.
already had a Texas playing Ohio State and a Michigan playing Oklahoma. That would never happen. Being raised in the South like I was and Ronnie, we thought football that only happens down here. It doesn't happen anywhere else. We don't know anything about anybody on the West Coast. But now we've kind of made it more like the NFL in a sense that it's national, and that's a good thing. But with NILs and portal transfer and maybe revenue sharing to come up, do you see some good things and bad things? What are your thoughts of things that have been good about football and things that you worry about in the future?
Well, I went blind covering revenue sharing and portal and NIL. So glad I retired in April because a week after that happened, Nico left Tennessee. It's like Nico quit on Tennessee. And I went on Paul Feinbaum, who was having me on to talk about retirement. And I said, Paul, first of all, I'd like to thank Nico and his family for validating my decision to retire because I was just done with all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'd gone blind. And my point had long been on Saturdays, none of that matters. The fans still want their team to win. They don't care how they win unless you're Connor Stallions or Michigan. They just want to beat their rival. They just want to win the game. None of that stuff comes into play. During the week, yeah, maybe. But the average, I'll tell you what, all this stuff you're talking about, I think the average fan either doesn't care or is too involved to even follow it because it's so complicated. I'm not minimizing it because I think we're a collective bargaining agreement away from, these guys finally having the rights they deserve. If you want to call them professionalized, I would submit that we're way
beyond that.
Way beyond that. When you still are required to show up at meetings and you're not paid. You're paid by a third party, but to me those are employment things. When you get penalized for not showing up to a meeting, well, there's one thing I know. If you want me to show up to a meeting, pay me. And that's what it is these days. But and my final point on that is it hasn't changed the game on the field. I talked about Missouri, Kansas. That was amazing. Michigan, Oklahoma was amazing. They had a transfer quarterback, Mateer, who's probably the leader for the Heisman. Right. And that's just going to be the way things go. Bill Belichick's brought in 70 new players. We'll see how that goes. Dion did that a couple of years ago and did turn around the program. Mm-hmm. So it's just a different way of getting things done.
Yeah. I've said also that whether you like it or dislike the NIL and it's changed a lot about who has a chance to be good that might not have had a chance to be good. Teams that have always had all the history and all the budget and all the facilities, they don't like it because a team that doesn't have all that can change a kid's mind real quick with a good NIL. And several schools, Oregon never had great football way back, and now you can see them. And Mississippi does a pretty good job of having talent like Alabama, and Miami feels like they can come back by the use of it. So, but I said like you that when it comes to Saturday, people who just love the game, they still see a very passionate, exciting football game. And now maybe it's even going to be more. You don't know who's going to win because talent can be redistributed so quickly.
Yeah, and when I was tailgating on Saturday, no one brought any of that up. Most of them didn't know that I was a former, sports writer, but no talking about that. They want their White Claw. They're watching their TV. They're partying, whatever, seeing friends. But it's the way of the world. And I think now you're seeing. You brought up Oregon. And you had that thing last week with Mike Gundy saying, we're getting outspent. How about this? Terry? Mike Gundy, whose program was funded into existence and competitiveness by Boone Pickens, complaining about money. So my point is that there's a way to spend a lot and there's a way to spend smart. And so schools like Oregon and Ohio State, and not Alabama, I think in the modern necessarily, has learned how to spend smart. We'll see about Texas Tech. They've gone all in. I think the number is $28 million on the number they're paying for all these portal guys. But that's all going to change next year. They spent all that before the new rules went into effect, where you've got to vet every deal in the house settlement with Deloitte. So a lot of that stuff isn't going to go through. But I think there are ways now of spending smart, not necessarily spending the most.
I wrote on X this past week in regard to that, and I said, Mike, come on now. You've been around the block a few times. You're one of the veterans of this business. If I recall correctly, in the 80s, when you were quarterback at Oklahoma State, they got put on probation twice for
Yep.
getting guys like Hartley Dykes.
Yep.
And then when I went and Googled it, Hartley Dykes even admitted, I got $5,000 and $200 a month. And I'm thinking, boy, the price has gone up. We've gone to 1.3 million now,
Yeah.
and the best player then only got that much. But but in a way, who's got the most money does have a chance to build the biggest, best team, and that's just the way it. And that's kind of the way it was, and the way it is.
It's just the parameters have changed. Like who?
Yeah.
Look at the Michigan thing. As bad a violation as I can remember. You being a coach understands like somebody doing to those lengths. Everybody steals signs in
Right.
game,
That's
or
what
does
you
it
do.
before the game, or does it in game, and shares it with the staff. But to go to those lengths, and I think I read the original report from the Big Ten back in
Right.
October 23 when this broke, and I keep bringing this up, and nobody has since. 79-page report from the NCAA last month didn't mention this, but the Big Ten did. Jim Harbaugh and Connor, by extension with Connor Stalions, went to the lengths of scouting Georgia in one of those games on the off chance they might meet them in the playoff. That's beyond the pale. Big Ten opponents is one thing, but scouting a team that you might play in the playoffs, and I don't think that appeals to anybody. But my point is the penalties were nothing. They got a fine $10 million. Somebody at Michigan, they find that between the seat cushions. They got so many boosters there. And Jim Harbaugh got a show cause. He's never coming back to college.
No.
Who cares? Neither is Connor Stalions. He got an 8-year show cause. So what are the deterrents for anybody to do anything in this modern era where you get $20.5 million a year to spend to go over it? What are they going to do to you? What are they going to do to you? Anything that keeps you eligible for the playoff.
Right.
It falls short. I don't care if they fine you. I don't care if they take away scholarships because you're going in the portal anyway. There's nothing to keep these schools from cheating.
Yeah, and what's I find a little bit humorous is that last year, Ohio State, they said they paid $20 million to put their football team together, and for that price, they won the national championship. Well, Michigan paid $20 million for stealing signals. And for that price, they won the national championship. But here's the different part, because I work with a network called Sports Grid, and we talk about the line because it's legal now on your phone or in your states to wager on these games. And for that reason, above a lot of other things, besides the fact that it's just not a level playing field. And we all know, I was an analyst at Clemson for 2 years before I went to ULM. All we did was watch TV copies to try to figure out what the signals were. You're allowed to do that. We tried to look up behind the towels or behind the boards to see what was but that's kind of the way you do it. But you look at all these people that are wagering lots of money on a game that they want to believe is a level playing field. That doesn't come off too good. And I think with that much money riding, and the NCAA has accepted the fact that this is the way it is now. And you're right. I think there's going to be a scandal somewhere down the road, probably, because wagering and these players and all the things that are going on, we're just waiting for something scary to happen. But that kind of stuff makes you think twice when people are now legally wagering on games, and you need to play by the rules.
Well, especially when you have a guy like you've already had the scandal in the NBA with the referee.
Mm-hmm.
You had Jonte Porter. I think it was Jonte. Was it Jonte of the Denver Nuggets openly talking about, well, if I was to fix a game, here's what I do. Like, I tell all my friends I'm going to be under in the first half. Like, he's thought about this stuff.
Yeah.
So if you've got multi-millionaires in the NBA being penalized for this stuff and even thinking about it, I don't care if players are getting paid in college, the temptations are still there because we've had legal state-sponsored sports gambling in the United States optional since 2018. The Supreme Court said it was okay. 32 states now allow it. So everything is on phones. I did a story last week about win probability, these in-game bets where, well, let's see, with 2 minutes left, Kansas State was at home losing to North Dakota, and North Dakota had a 99.9% chance of winning that game. Well, if you got down on K-State at that point, you got rich because they had 0.01% chance to win, and they won. Guess what 0.01 chance to win is? It's the same odds that the sun isn't coming up tomorrow. I'll take those odds on a comeback any day because the sun's on a really good run right now coming up every day. So it's really crazy, and you've got to be really specific. I talked to a guy named Billy Walters. He has been called the best sports really better of all time. He's 78 years old now, still runs a business. And he keeps texting me, I interviewed him, backdoor covers. Here's what ruins things. I talked to Michael Francis, who's a former Colombo crime family guy who was actually consulting with the NCAA at one point and is admitted to murdering people. I said, okay, I understand basketball. I understand some other sports. Do you know when college football is being fixed? And he said, I absolutely do. And he described it to me. He said, just pick a random game where, it's a rout and some team gets a backdoor cover at the end. Somebody knows something. He has his suspicions, and he says he knows for a fact college football games have been fixed. That blows my mind that could happen. I had a source tell me a couple of years ago there was an officiating crew that was infiltrated that was throwing games. And here's how they did it. He would not tell me who, major college, I don't know, but the crew. So we're talking about 8 guys that had to be going on this. You know what they do? Pass interference and holding are such subjective penalties.
Right.
They influence the over-under, like the under. If you called a lot of pass interferences or a lot of holdings, that would keep the number under. And if you got down on that before the game, you could make a lot of money if you had the officiating crew.
And I'll let you go after this, but thinking about how much we think about the line nowadays, I was caught off guard when Lane Kiffin in his post-game press conference against Kentucky apologized to his fans for letting Kentucky kick a field goal with about 3 seconds left. He had an 8.5-point spot on the game. He was winning by 10, and he eventually won by 7 as clock ran out. And I said, well, gosh, the fact that he knows what the line is, and I think what he's saying, which is perfectly legal, we're going to try to beat the line as hard as we can, no matter what happens. We're going to make sure we score one more time, or we're going to add some more points, or whatever it takes. I don't know if that's what all was meant, but that was the suggestion I got. I know what the line is. We're going to do our best to get more than that, and I want to apologize for not. But it's interesting in that. But Dennis, I want to thank you for coming on this show. This is. I hate that you're gone. I love reading your stuff. I'm gonna have to find you on Spotify and hopefully
Substack. I'm on.
I'm sorry, I said Spotify. I meant Substack. Yeah. I've got to get my stuff straight on all this social media. But great having you on the show. We appreciate it and we miss you.
Yeah, Google Dennis's Substack. That's me. You'll see everything stockpiled there. And got a bunch of stuff coming. Our good friend Josh Pate has agreed to talk to me.
Oh, yeah.
I've got a weekly Heisman update that I do. I know people love the Heisman, but I have a little fun with it. Not the same candidates every week. This week, the Grambling band gets a spot because that was the most interesting thing about the Ohio State Grambling game. So love to do it.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you, Dennis.
Right. Thanks.
I think people, sometimes we some of our younger football fans haven't been able to follow. 27 straight years he was been a college sports writer for college football, CBS, during that time. And I was when I left Auburn, I went not only to ABC Sports in New York to do the studio show, but I also wrote the articles every week for Yahoo. Back then, that was when Yahoo, I think, bought Rivals, or Rivals bought Yahoo. Back then we were all the same, and I was their main sports writer for 1 or 2 articles a week back then. And Dennis and I exchanged ideas many times, but he's been in a lot of the games, and guys like him, I think about him in so many of the games, and it's like the biggest games I ever at Auburn, it was always Brent Musburger, I think, doing the games, and the coach from Eagles, who was the head coach, Dick Vermeil, and Brent Musburger. Seemed like they had all my big games and my dad's big games, but Dennis was always there on a big article or a big topic, and I'm looking forward to check him out on Substack for what he's writing about nowadays.
Yeah, Dennis has always done a great job. We've had this, been a part of CBS now, 24/7 has for several years, and I've gotten
Yeah.
known that way. And actually, the first way I met Dennis was I was at Southern Miss, and he ripped me in a column. And
Oh, he got me a few times. That's his job.
that's right. But no, I've always liked Dennis. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Let's
I
talk
think
about
the
Auburn.
hardest. Yeah, I think let's get back to Auburn. That was fun. I think that's part of the stuff you're going to get on our show because I mean that's part of the interesting side. We have so many great people working with the Auburn Undercover and writing articles and talking about the games, and that is what Auburn's all about. We're talking about football, and but there are some other topics that are interesting, and hopefully we can have some guests that can add a little insight into other areas of college football that fascinate me or many of us that have been in this business a long time. But I also wrote on the Auburn Undercover on the
Message board.
on our discussion board that don't overanalyze games like that. We won. We did exactly what we needed to not do. And now you can understand. I'm now an analyst. I watch every game because I've got to go out there on live podcast with Sports Grid, and I cover the SEC and the ACC, and I've got to watch all these games. And so while I'm watching Auburn, I'm watching two other games, or I watched LSU, and I'm watching Clemson, and I'm watching the Florida, and I've got one game on the phone, and one game on my iPad, and one game on TV. And as I watched Auburn just manhandle, basically, I mean, some sacks early. I think we had to check mark a problem. Let's make sure we don't hold on to the ball too long and take sacks we don't need to take. I don't think the game was in question enough to worry too much about that. But as I watched LSU have a hard time with La Tech, and I watched Florida just totally, I mean, all that goodwill that Neighbors that the head coach got from the success he had, he's lost it in one game. And then, of course, Clemson down 16-0 early and then 16-3 at halftime. They were wishing they had a game like Auburn had. They were wishing they were ready to play because all they did was create some doubt. And the good thing about Auburn, I know about you, that Auburn did what they needed to do in that game. Number one, after running the ball so much in the first game, because that was the way you had to win the first one. You know, Jackson the quarterback had to run the football to win that football game. Well, I think Hugh Freeze is smart enough to know we need to get him some passes. We need to get Coleman and Singleton into the game and show we've got an effective passing attack, build the confidence of our quarterback because he can also throw it. And so there was an intention to bring the passing game in, and I thought they were fantastic. The big plays, the explosive plays, 3 touchdown passes, I think 250 yards of offense passing the football, along with about 220, 230, or 240 running the football, which was critical to also have. But that was very important for what do we want to accomplish this game. We want to make sure we're not just a running quarterback, but we're a running and throwing quarterback, and I think that's the key that you have to have. Just like Oklahoma beating Michigan, their quarterback could throw and run. And that's what we saw out of Jackson Arnold on Saturday, was that ability to do both those things. And I think even Hugh Freeze said after the game, he probably would have gone 28 of 28 if I hadn't been throwing downfield so much. You know, he was trying to create explosive plays, create that type of offense to go with the physical running attack that we have. And so that was the big takeaway from that game was, well, the domination on defense that they had and the offensive balance and passing game that we showed against Ball State.
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, 24, 28, 251 yards for Jackson Arnold. And you got a little bit of time for Deuce Knight too. From a running standpoint, I mean, Jeremiah Cobb had 121 yards, 224 for the team. Pretty good game.
Yeah, and Jeremiah Cobb is one that we weren't sure he was going to be the guy. It was going to be kind of running back guy committee, but I think we always felt like he was getting ready to burst out and be something special. But twice I saw him do something that for a running back I think is very important. When he broke through the line, a big open hole, he didn't run over the safety. He made the safety miss. And I tell my backs, man, any back can run, even any good physical back can run over the safety. And then the pursuit catches him, he makes about 5 more yards. But the great back never slows down and makes the safety miss, and he runs for 70 yards. And so I love a back that's physical enough. I remember I had old Steve Davis and James Bostic. They could run over that safety, but they didn't make him miss too many times. They just flat ran over him. But the rest of the team tackles you. I thought the one thing I liked about Jeremiah Cobb, a couple times he gave that little quick step and that side step and made the safety miss completely and turned 10 or 12 yard gains into big gains. And I thought he really jumped out and gave us something special. Although I do think there's 2 or 3 running backs that ultimately can do it, along with Damari Alston. Now he's injured. Yeah, he was injured, I think.
He was banged up, and then
banged up.
Darrell Robinson, who transferred.
That's right.
I think he can be pretty good too. I mean, I think he had one run for 50-something yards. So
yeah, you'll take more than one running back to get through the SEC. You're going to get banged up, and you're a gazelle. When you're a running back, you can't get nicked up and play very well. As a wide receiver or running back, you can be an offensive lineman, defensive lineman, and play a little bit nicked up. But when you're at that position, you've got to be well. So it's going to take a few backs. But so good to see a back develop himself like he did. Other than that, I said if you're going to have to be tight, I mean, look at the game closely. I thought we took some sacks early, 4 sacks in the first half. Couple of them for sure. He probably, when a quarterback knows you're better than the other team, he'll hold on to that ball too long. In a big game, you pop it out of there. So I thought a couple of times he probably just waited to look for a second receiver, and probably a sack he didn't need to take in that situation. Regardless, you don't want to take sacks. That stops drives against a real good team. And then 8 penalties was still more than you want to have. I think the other team had 6 or 7, but I think 8, cut your penalties down because it won't matter until it's a big close game. And after South Al, we don't want to say after South Al, but there are some big ones coming after that one's over, although that one will be the next one.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I wanted to get your thoughts. Last week, Jackson Arnold rushed for a bunch of yards, and the message board was upset because he didn't throw for enough. And then this week, 24 out of 28. So, and I kind of thought that's what was going to happen. I mean, you want to show both sides, and you want to get your quarterback comfortable, and you want to build him some confidence, especially when he's new in the system. What were your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I think I could have called that. They have prop bets they have now. How many yards is the quarterback going to get? How many touchdown passes? And somebody had asked me, what do you think Arch Manning's going to do? And I said, let me tell you something. I know what Steve Sarkisian's going to do. He's going to get him 4 or 5 touchdown passes and a bunch of yards because that's what he needs for his confidence. That's what their team needs. That's what their fans need. And so that's exactly what they did. They didn't play great first half, but he threw 4 touchdown passes in that first half and then piled on some yardage because the head coach, being a former quarterback, he knew that that's what his quarterback needed and that's what their team needed. I thought Hugh Freeze going into this game knew exactly what Auburn needed. They needed to showcase those 2 great receivers, maybe 3 receivers, and that quarterback throwing the football. And so that was the game plan. And I thought, because Hugh Freeze is an old offensive guy. He's worked with some pretty good quarterbacks. And I felt like that's one. And he's kind of, some of us, I had the same hit on me. You throw too much, you don't run enough. That comes, and I think it's Hugh. He gets that every now and then thrown at him. But I think he knew as far as what he needed to accomplish for his offense down the road, we needed to throw touchdown passes. And I think the fans bought into it, had a ball watching it. There was some fantastic big plays, and they could have run it every down and still won the game big. That's where they could have run it every down and won it big. But against good teams, against the time, and they coming up with some good ones here down the road, you got to have balance. You've got to be able to run or throw depending on whether the defense is sticking everybody up close to the line or they're backing people off. You've got to be willing to run or throw the ball early in the game depending on how you're being played. And I think that's what Auburn did a great job of on Saturday, just to get them further along in the progression of their football team.
Yeah, and you talked about Auburn playing really well. If you look around the rest of the conference, we had some teams that didn't play really well.
All right.
Florida just, face planted. But Auburn's got Oklahoma coming up. I'm sorry, Auburn has Oklahoma coming up here in a couple of weeks. They had a great win. They beat Michigan. But you had some. LSU didn't look great.
No. I live in Louisiana, and everybody around here is an LSU fan. and they were unhappy. I mean, La Tech was close to getting down to a one-score game late in the game, and then LSU finished them off. But it was just everybody was just saying, "Gosh, what happened?" And then you could say the same thing at Georgia. They're playing Appalachian State. I mean Austin P. And it's kind of the same thing. They're out there piddling around and not getting things done. And I promise you, the worst thing you can do is to be sitting at Auburn or Georgia as the head coach on that sideline and say, "Oh my gosh, why did I get myself? Why did we not just finish these guys off?" But that's the Georgia and the LSU game. And then Clemson's down. That's not an SEC game, but they didn't look very good at all, even winning the game. And I think they created some doubt with their team about how good they really are. And that they may be that good when they get to their conference and play better, but right now they've created doubt in the minds of their players and fans a little bit. And then the worst, obviously, was Billy Napier, the head coach at Florida. Now, I watched that game closely. They made some poor decisions that cost them that game. They lost to South Florida, who obviously South Florida's beaten 2 top 25 teams now. They beat Boise handily. And then they go down to the Swamp and beat Florida that were favored. I want to say 9.5, 10 points favored in the game. And they kick a field goal as time ran out. But really what I questioned most, it was about 2.5 minutes left in the game, and Florida stopped them. And on a fourth down, got the ball back around midfield around midfield, not far from midfield. And they got to run the clock out. And on 1st and 10, they throw the ball incomplete, stop the clock. And it wasn't that they just threw the ball. If you remember, it was a speed out. It was a quick out. Mm-hmm. And the guy's wide open. You don't throw an out unless it's open. And he missed it. I said, don't throw a pass that you're not 100% sure you're going to catch. So now they've not taken a timeout away from USF. They've got a clock stopped. They didn't make a lot of running on yardage on second down. So now they got to throw again on third down. And that stops the clock again. And then, of course, USF got the ball back now. They've got over 2 minutes left. All they need is a field goal. Not only that, they drove it right down the field and got down to about the 8-yard line. And Florida couldn't. And Florida has better athletes and couldn't stop them. So that was a tough one. Of course, being the SEC, you've always got next week, and Florida has LSU, and they've got next week. And so I don't know enough about this conference and some people bring it right back, and the season can be changed, but they've really got themselves into the fans were tough on Billy last year before DJ Lagway started for them the last 7 games, and now they're right back on him again. And so that's going to be tough for them now with one of the tougher schedules in the conference.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And having lived that for 3 years, that's Ron Zook used to talk about, still does, the noise in the system. There's a lot of noise in that system this week. I mean, and I guess one thing that really keeps coming up is Billy Napier calling the plays. He was strongly encouraged to get an offensive coordinator last year, and he's been calling it since he's been there. So what do you think about, is that sometimes, Jimbo called plays, Bobby Petrino called plays. Is that, does that take away from your ability to focus on being the head coach during the week?
That's a $1 million question, and the answer is not real clear. The great play callers, whether it be my father, who through the 80s was one of the best, had to back off and then tried to get back. Steve Spurrier, I think, gave it up twice and came back and started doing it again. I know I was a play caller my entire career till I got to ULM and hired Rich Rodriguez, and the kind of deal was you had to let him call the plays. But it gets hard as a head coach. And I remember back in the 80s this is what made me think that when you mentioned it, that Buddy Ryan was the defensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears. And they won the Super Bowl with a defense that he made famous called the Bear defense. It's just a double eagle. People that know football, they cover the center, they cover both guards, and it was a different type of style. And they won the Super Bowl. And Buddy Ryan was the inventor, was the creator of that scheme. Well, Ditka retires, he becomes the head coach. And the first thing he did was hire him a defensive coordinator, hired all the others, and within 2 years he got fired for not winning. And his greatest quote was, "The dumbest thing I ever did was I fired my best assistant coach." That was himself, because he made his mark being a great play caller. And somewhere along the line, you got to find that happy median. Some coaches never call plays, and so they give it, and I mean, most of them. Most coaches are not the play callers. They hire somebody and they do it, and they interject during the week. We talked about that last week of who's calling the plays. During the game, one guy's calling it, but during the week, a lot of people, and the head coach has input into it. But I do think it's very difficult as you get your head coaching responsibilities. And Jimbo called play because he worked for me for 14 years, and that's kind of what he did. But as you get through it, and I think Hugh Freeze is calling the plays. At least he has been calling the plays in the past. He's saying it's everybody has a responsibility, but somebody is making that last call. Maybe it's him, maybe it's not.
I thought it was really interesting. After the game, he started talking about, I called this, I called that. I think, for me, and I think Auburn fans too, that it's pretty clear what's going on. He's calling the plays. I mean, he's taking input in between series and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, he's calling the plays. I mean, I thought that was pretty clear after the game in the comments that he made.
Well, it's funny because, and I think sometimes you do that because to put the heat on yourself. I know my first year at Auburn, and I brought our offense over from Sanford, and we had my brother Tommy was the coordinator, but we weren't expected to win many games, and I thought we might go through a very frustrating year. So I said, I'm going to be the offensive coordinator this year. Not that I wanted people to pay attention to me, but if we didn't do well, I wanted them to have to get on me. I was the guy making the money as the head coach, and it takes a while to put it on. So then by the next year, I named my brother Tommy the offensive coordinator. He was the older of the guy. He had been the coordinator for Pat Dye the year before I got there, and so I retained him in that position. But I think Hugh Freeze at times wants to not take all the don't take the praise all yourself, but also don't force the responsibility to be on an assistant if you can take it upon yourself. We hired everybody. We gave them their responsibilities. We gave them their title. In a way, the buck stops at the top. And you've got to take responsibility for those things. And the difference nowadays that if you don't do well, coaches are firing their assistants 4 or 5 games into the season. That didn't happen a whole lot back in the day. You stayed with it all the year, and I had a philosophy that if I hired a guy, I try to want to stay with him. If it was my job to get him doing the best he can, and go from there. But anyway, I thought they did a great job. I thought Hugh had a good play on Saturday, and it was a good win in a lot of ways. And I just don't think you need to overanalyze any part of it, but it's fun to do. Other than the fact that it's fun to do, it's fun to analyze your team, and your typical fan loves to analyze the team. But you got to have a big picture. Go watch the rest of the games too, and then go watch what people went through that didn't play so well. Well, they don't want to think they're bad. They just want to. You don't always play well. My dad told me, and he was a head coach for years before I became a head coach, that right or wrong, you can't get your kids up for every game. Your kids don't get up for every game. They don't get up for Ball State like they do for Alabama, no matter what you try. And so you've got to make sure they're fundamentally sound. They can block and tackle, that they can execute the plays on your game plan, and then you know what the heck you're doing to put them in a good position to be successful, because they don't always get up for a game. That's just the facts of life. You're not at that high point, but you got to win anyway, and you got to play well anyway. And that probably was the case Saturday. They probably didn't sit in that locker room before the game like they do before Georgia or Alabama, but they sitting there knowing that, hey, we didn't like the bad taste in our mouth from the year before. We like what it felt like last week, and we want to taste that again.
Well, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I mean, just on the hoof, I mean, Auburn looks better than they've looked in 4 or 5 years. I mean, talent wise, coordination wise, I mean, just all the way around. I mean, they look like a more complete football team now than at any time in the Harsin era, and frankly, at any time during the Freeze era up until now.
Yeah, well, I think that starts with their quarterback. I think they've got one now that they're comfortable. They really struggled to find an answer and could not find it. And everything starts in football with the quarterback, because if each team has 75 plays, your quarterback's going to touch it 75 times, and if he doesn't do a good job, it's going to affect everybody else. And then it goes to the lines, and I think offensive line. That's why I said be careful about those early sacks, because your offensive line's been playing well. You ran for a ton of yardage. Let's make sure you don't give up protection. But I think it's the defensive front. I mean, not only did they only have 68 yards of offense. They had -3 defense rushing. And I think one of the big improvements I see is that Auburn defensive front is pretty nasty. They're pretty sporty in the way they're playing. I think that's a big key, because ultimately in the SEC, even though we talk a lot about the quarterback, you win with that offensive defensive line and how well they perform, so that those backs can look good and that quarterback can sit in the pocket. And so the secondary doesn't have to cover people for a long time on pass plays or make open field tackles for guys that get through. And so that from just an observer or an analyst looking through it, I think their defensive line has a chance to be pretty dang good in that conference when everybody has pretty good people.
Yeah, I agree. And, Auburn's next big opponent, you got South Alabama this week, and then Oklahoma had a good win. I thought they looked, but they've got Temple this week. What are your, we'll pick some games. I don't expect that Oklahoma will have much trouble with Temple.
No, that's one of those no-line games where you just pick, you just got to make sure you go out there. I think they're play bad and you still win. Temple's not even at the level that some of the other teams that they play. I think they played Illinois State. But Temple playing a little bit better, but you got to go out there and play your football game, and take care of business. That's what I like to say. Make sure you take care of business. But I think they answered a lot of questions with their quarterback situation. And then Venables, just like offensive play callers, he named himself the defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. Zach Alley was their defensive coordinator the year before. He was my defensive coordinator at ULM, and I hired him because he was Venables' GA and analyst for about 8 years. He was a student assistant, graduate assistant, analyst, and I wanted a young Venables as a defensive coordinator, and so I grabbed him. He's now the defensive coordinator at West Virginia. But I thought Venables taking over was important. But that was a big game. But there were some other big ones. I mean, I looked at, okay, of course, Florida got beat, but Mississippi State beating Arizona State. Yeah. They were picked last in our conference. Arizona State was picked first in theirs. And they were favored, and they won the Big 12 last year. And Mississippi State gave them a little cowbell Saturday. And when I first went into Mississippi State, Starkville, you're not ready for those cowbells because they banned them for a while. Yeah, but then they brought them back, and when they bring those cowbells back, that's a big home field advantage. That was a great win. I think Ole Miss got a monkey off their back, beating Kentucky up in Lexington. They lost that game last year. I thought Lane got humiliated because he had such a strong team, and he lost to a very, very average Kentucky team. And they went out there and won that game, and that was big. And for those of us who don't watch Big 12 football, Mizzou got a big win over Kansas. Kansas is a very good football team, and they have a winning. Lance Leopold, their head coach, was at Buffalo when I was at Akron, and I've watched him a long time. He won 6 national championships at Wisconsin Whitewater before he ever went to Buffalo. So Mizzou went in there and got behind, I want to say 21-0 or 14-0, and came back and won the game handily with their quarterback they got from Penn State. So very impressive. And then we got to be careful because down the road we got Vandy. And Vandy right now is 2-0. And I thought Virginia Tech played very well against South Carolina. I thought, I said they got whipped, they got beat, but they played pretty tough physically. I said they stood toe-to-toe and played them. And then they got ahead of Vandy, and then Vandy comes back and takes the game under control and wins it in the second half and wins a game against Virginia Tech. And that's a big win for Vandy, too. And so, you can go right down the list. And Tennessee kind of scared. They put a ton of points in their game on East Tennessee State, and another team that they were just better than. But the best thing that happened to them, they lost Nico Iamaleava to UCLA. He's done terrible. And the quarterback they got from Appy State, he played against us when I was at ULM. The guy can throw the football. And Tennessee has played great defense and run it. But if they start to throw good deep balls, be careful about Tennessee, because when they can throw the deep ball. Now, I don't think we played Tennessee during the regular season this year, but I thought they had an easy win in their game. Arkansas beat Arkansas State without any trouble at all. South Carolina and South Carolina State, really no trouble. We talked about LSU playing pretty not good, one ugly game. And then Alabama beat my old school ULM 73-0. Unfortunately, all you can say is there's 1.9 million reasons why you play that game at ULM, and that's all has a dollar sign by it. But wasn't much of a game. No,
it really wasn't. And if we looked at this week, I think you've got some really, really big games and some pivotal games. starting in Tuscaloosa. Wisconsin at Alabama. I mean, this is a huge game for Kalamazoo.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, because no matter what they did to ULM, the fans didn't jump back on ship. They haven't jumped on the head coach's ship yet. That's too much. They've lost too many underdogs 4 times in a row. They've lost to double-digit underdogs 3 times at the end of last season, 1 time. They're going to have to see a win over Wisconsin. Even that one's going to do half of it. Then after that, I think you see Alabama play Georgia and some teams down the road. But they'll need to win that one against and not a great Wisconsin team, but a good Wisconsin Big Ten team. But maybe biggest game is Georgia-Tennessee, because that game is probably the biggest of the conference games that we're going to see out there. And that one, Georgia's favored by 4.5 right now. That's an early line.
3.5. It's down to 3.
Is it down to 3? Okay. You grab one line now, and of course I have to talk line now because that's kind of what you do as an analyst. But I grabbed 4.5 from somebody. But I'm already thinking Tennessee, if they can throw deep balls like they did, remember in 22 when they threw them with Herndon Hooker. That's the only thing different from them being a championship team. They play great defense. They've run the ball. They just don't have that. Ayamaliaba could not hit the deep ball. He was a very poor deep ball thrower. I think they're probably glad they got this young guy, from Appy State. But that'll be a pretty big game. Of course, Florida LSU, you can't ever discount Florida. As bad as Florida look, just be careful because they got good football players. And they beat LSU last year. And
this year it's in Baton Rouge, which is also.
I know, and LSU will be. I mean, Florida will come back and play a great football game, I think. And that one's not. And LSU didn't play great last week, so I think a lot of times when you watch early season games and teams that are highly favored play lesser teams, you can't get too much out of them as long as you did your job, like Auburn did. You can't read too much into it. Some coaches, 3 touchdown lead or 3.3 score lead, they're going to substitute. Other guys, and I think Lane Kiffin has a habit, when he gets ahead, he's going to go put more on. Everybody's a little different. And you have to be careful because when you start looking, well, he didn't beat them by enough, or he didn't do this or didn't do that. And even early in a year, even when I was at Auburn, if I played a 1AA early or not a really good team, I would probably do nothing that resembled what I wanted to do against that second game. Because if it was the second or third game, it was usually LSU, and it meant something in the SEC West back then. And so you saved a lot. And so we're now getting through these non-conference games, and we're still seeing a little bit of not what a team's really all about. That's why, again, I've said it twice or a million times. Good for Auburn to go out there and take care of business, because you can sometimes see the worst side of a football team. But it got some good football. I was trying to think of any other great games. We got Texas A&M, Notre Dame.
We got A&M and Notre Dame. We've got
that's awesome. A&M and Notre Dame. I've got them right now at a -6.5 at A&M in Notre Dame. I tell you, I would take. This is what I have to do now. I would take with 6.5 points. I'm taking A&M. I just think you give me 6.5 in A&M, and I'm taking it because they play great defense. They've got a defensive type of head coach. They're going to be very physical. Notre Dame doesn't score. They've got a young quarterback, and he did a good job, but I think they'll run the football. So I do think that'll be tight. I'm not saying right now I'm not ready to pick against Notre Dame, but I think I would take A&M in 6.5 just because of the type of team they have. And they're both ranked. I mean, A&M is preseason right now. They're 16th. Notre Dame is number 8. And 13 of the top 25 teams in the AP are SEC schools still. So and Auburn's got 4 or 5 of them still on the roster on the lineup coming up. So focus on South Al. And I don't think South Al's pretty good. They'll be better than Ball State, but I don't know if they're the cream of the Sun Belt like they were pretty close a couple of years ago. I think James Madison up there and a few others, but they'll be a test if you're not ready to play. So we've got to be ready to play in that game. And Arkansas Ole Miss is another one that's pretty dang good, and that's a big one for Sam Pittman. He's got them kind of 2-0 right now, but this will be his first big test. Ole Miss 9.5 points. I have a hard time on that one too. Arkansas is playing pretty dang good.
The only issue I'm thinking they are in Oxford. If it was in Fayetteville, that's a tough place to play. I mean,
I know.
Place to play.
We had tough games there. Our first game when I was at Auburn, we played them at War Memorial Stadium, and lost on we got behind and had to catch up. Now we beat them in Fayetteville, but I don't know if people remember the year we went undefeated. We went up to Fayetteville. There was like 6 inches of snow on the ground. We couldn't see the field. They just had to put pylons on the corners and play like that. And Reed McMillan, our big fullbacks, took the ball about 8 straight times up the middle, and we ran the clock out and scored at the end to keep our winning streak going. But that's a tough place to play, and that'll be a big one. Arkansas, and I mean they're border. That's kind of a border war too now. When you talk about northwest Mississippi and southeast Arkansas, that'll be. I live right there in a corner right now. I'm in Monroe, which is northeast corner of Louisiana, and I'm a lot more familiar with these Arkansas fans and these Ole Miss fans.
It's I'm telling you what, and I've never been a huge Lane Kiffin fan, but I think they've had 10 at least 10 wins out of the last 4 seasons at Ole Miss. And we're not talking about doing that at Alabama or Auburn or LSU or something, but or Florida. We're talking about doing that at Ole Miss.
Ole Miss. Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, I think, and we were talking about that earlier when we were talking about NILs and revenue sharing and all that stuff that we talked about at the beginning of the show. But Ole Miss, they've always been committed to doing with that to get players. They're very involved, and I think they made a decision early. Their fans understand they've got to put up or shut up. They've got to put them because they don't have the history and the stadium and the population that a lot of other people do. So they've got to be able to put NILs up there, and they do it. And they've gotten great football players, and Lane Kiffin's known for that. And he's kind of a guy that does it. He's disliked by a lot of coaches, but because you can call it arrogance, you can call it confidence, you can call it whatever you want to, but he's got great confidence. He wins. Ole Miss people are glad they've got him. He's got them competing with the best in the conference. Beat the pants off me and at Akron. We played him in the Boca Raton Bowl, and he just had too much of a good team and beat us really good. But he's given them a good team. But that'll be a good one, Ole Miss and Arkansas. Arkansas's got a heck of a quarterback, and he gives them a chance to win football games too.
Yeah, he does. And Kiffin said something. He was really close to it was down to him and Hugh Freeze when Freeze was hired at Auburn, and but after all that went down, and we can that's a story for another day. But Kiffin made a comment that I thought was really interesting. He said, I needed Oxford more than Oxford needed me. And, he's a different, as quirky as he is, he's a different guy than he was at USC. He's a friend of ours. I won't call any names on the air, but, he said, when I got out here, he said, everybody in the building, from the secretary to the trainers, to the managers, to the coaching staff, to the players, he said, everybody hated the guy. He said, I don't know what he did, but if his goal was to make everybody not stand him, he said he did a pretty good job. And it sounds like he's changed a little bit at Ole Miss. I mean, he really has seemed to embrace Ole Miss, and they seem to have embraced him.
Yeah, he's like Nick Saban. You like him or you hate him, and quirky or. Lane Kiffin would have a different type of personality, but have the same type of quirkiness. But like I said, you name the games winning football games, and I've said this. Billy Napier at Florida, I don't know of a finer person than he is as a person. And I really, after that game, I just felt sorry for him because of how much abuse he took last year. Then he got that thing turned around, and all of a sudden, he's the hottest thing. They're the hottest thing around, and in one game, it just totally flipped, and now it's going to be they've got, when you have a game like that, just like the coach at Alabama, you better show you can turn that ship around, and beating ULM or beating teams that are not very good, not at the level you are, is not going to get people turned back around. So it'll be interesting how they respond. And right now, Billy Napier, that's the mission in life that he now has to carry, is can he get that thing righted? Because I do know this, they have pretty good talent, and they got a quarterback that's proven he can win in this league. And so it'll be interesting to see if he can get that team to respond.
Yeah, well, they've got a bear of a schedule. That's the other thing. They may have the toughest schedule in the conference, and I'm sorry, in the country. It's going to be interesting to see how if he's able to turn that around. I know, our third year down there. I mean, we go out and we had of course, Mississippi State was really bad that year, but we lose to Mississippi State on a Saturday, and we get fired on Monday, and, so I've been there, it's going to be, Scott Strickland at Florida the AD just got a big extension. He was there at Auburn with us. But he just got a big extension. So I expect him to be there, but you've got a presidential transition going on at Florida. They don't have a permanent president. It's going to be interesting to see if, how bad it gets. Can they turn it around? I mean, I think they got the good enough players to, but the schedule is so tough that you may be pretty good, not matter, and still lose.
Yeah, when I looked at the over/under for people's schedules before the season began in the SEC, I saw a couple of 10-2s or 11-1s, but I saw a ton of people 7-5. I saw a ton of people. I thought they could win 7, but dang, that over/under was 6.5, and I'm thinking, gosh, some people are going to be 5-7. As many people are going to be 5-7 as they are 7-5. And at Florida, I don't know if 7-5 is good enough, this year. Because I was thinking, I was thinking it'd have to be 8. Now, Scott Strickland, he was at Auburn the entire time I was there, and he was working his way up through the administrative levels, and he's got quite a program there. I think they've won more national championships this past year in their overall Olympic sports and all their sports. They won more than anybody. I'm pretty sure them or Southern Cal or UCLA. But Florida has an unbelievable athletic program for all sports. But you know what? And they won the national championship. I think they did with basketball. If Auburn was it, and then Auburn had a great basketball. But as you know, in the SEC, it's that oblong ball that counts, and you got to win that funny shaped ball, which is football.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, it's good to be with you. Our time's up.
Well, it went fast. We sure got a great time. Dennis Dodd, we're so glad Dennis joined us. It went longer than probably we expected, but I couldn't get off. There's so many interesting things he has to talk about. And again, thank him. And again, I can't say enough for our sponsor, Haley Red Development Family Foundation. That's the money they give to Auburn every year. They donate scholarships to Auburn every year. They're committed to Auburn community and to the Auburn program. And we thank Tom Haley and the entire group over there for sponsoring this show. And hopefully we get some people coming back and listen to us next week.
Yep. Got everybody who's listening. Thanks for listening, and click like and subscribe below. It really helps us out. See you next week.
See you next week.
For more than 100 years, the Haley Red Family Foundation has proudly supported Auburn University scholarships, investing in students' dreams and brighter futures. For over 25 years, we've also stood beside the Sheriff's Girls Ranch, helping young women find hope and opportunity. The Haley Red Family Foundation, building generations